Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. Hi, Youth Worker Nation. This is Doug Edwards with Youth Worker on Fire. Today, I have one of my first students. When I moved here in student ministry, DJ was in the 8th grade. And by the way, he was from a Dutch family, still is. I think y'all are still Dutch, is that right?
We are. We haven't changed.
All right. Yeah, they were in Canada. Dad was a farmer. Brothers were farmers, his uncles. And they said, hey, we're going to move to Florida. We're tired of this cold. And they came down here, and the farm got flooded. And so they all went in different ways.
Right.
Dad became a real estate guy. Met DJ when I came up here from actually South Lake County in Orlando. Went on some of our first retreats together. Went on our first mission trip. You're the first high school.
Yeah.
Mission trip. Your brother, Brad, was the first middle school the same summer.
Yep.
And from Arizona to Dominican Republic. He got the cool end of the deal.
Right.
We got the hot end.
Right.
We'll get to the Dominican. No escaping the heat. You became part of the media team, which we didn't know. I don't even think we called it a team.
Right.
I think we just said, hey, let's do this stuff.
We were just doing it, right?
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And we're doing slides and big screen productions with slides.
That's right.
And running all over creation, trying to get them developed, and then until we learned how to do that ourselves. Covering
That was groundbreaking back then.
That's
Nobody
right.
was doing anything like that.
That's right. And we're covering gym skylights
Right.
with plastic and doing all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
And, it was brutal. I mean, I think the other day, I think a few months ago, I saw you and I said, hey, I'm so sorry for how hard I was on you guys. But you guys, I was the hardest on you and Matt Johnson than anybody else that I'd worked with, and did not intend to build a media influence throughout the county, but wanted to be able to build student ministry by filling in those areas that people needed.
Right.
And that just became one of the areas. Then you graduated from high school, went to Valencia because it was a great film school at that time.
Yep.
And what I remember is that you sold a truck to buy a camera.
I sold everything. I had everything I had. I sold to buy my first camera, and then got a loan for the editing equipment that I needed. So
you're the first guy to buy Medium 100. Is that right?
Yeah,
Which is
one of the first ones.
And you're getting calls from all over the country about it.
Yep. So
hey, how's this working?
Right. We were had no idea what we were doing, but that's how I learned. Jump into it.
And once again, you're from a Dutch family. You're also from an entrepreneur family. We didn't call it that back then, but now everybody calls it entrepreneur. And you've done many, many entrepreneurial ventures in ministry, as well as a volunteer, as well as in industry.
Right.
And right now we're talking about real estate and multifamily homes that you're doing. But you had built quite a media empire. I don't know if you called it empire. To people who aren't doing that, it would have been an empire. And Brad came down from Chicago after moving up there, and you guys went and out of the 5 brothers, we know that one of your brothers is deceased from a drowning. So you had 5 brothers, though. And then from Jeff on down to Richard.
Yep.
You guys are just in the middle, you and Brad.
That's right.
And the middle guys always get it done, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so, but I think everybody's involved one way or another.
Right. Right.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Those middle school years, those high school years, that's when we did a lot together. And you know what? You filled in the blanks for me with your business. I mean, opened your doors when you didn't have time to let me use your computer when we were getting into that stuff.
Well, I think the value there came from my experience of not having that. When we were doing in the early days, maybe you had a plan, but I know we didn't. We just kind of went with it and kind of did the stuff as it came up. But it was, we didn't have the outside support. We kind of did that stuff, with you and some of the other students. We did that on our own. And so when I was in a situation where I could support what you were doing, continue that, I mean, that was a no-brainer. That seemed like the right thing to do to keep that going. I know that was a key part in your ministry.
Yes.
And I don't know if that was ever your plan or it just worked out like that, but that was your in with the schools.
Yes, yeah, and I really was not into photography. In fact, I took a film class at Appalachian State. I hated it. It was horrible.
Yep.
Worst professor ever. So 2 years before I came here to the North Lake County area, Youth for Christ Campus Life Division that I was in, they said, hey, here's $1,500. Go buy some camera equipment. If you'll shoot pictures for us and stuff for 2 years, the equipment's yours. And that's how it started. I had no idea.
Right.
And a guy by the name of Mark Zier, who was Campus Life Guide Fort Lauderdale, but he was also shooting pictures for the Miami Dolphins, for the high school there, for sports teams, all kinds of stuff, and made it his second job, which we're going to talk about,
right,
for youth pastors and guys that are doing full-time ministry. I came up here just going, okay, I'm going to do pep rallies, and I'm going to do end-of-the-year things,
right,
because those are the things that are needed. And so that gave me access to schools because I was doing something they needed and nobody else was doing. And I drug you guys around,
right,
and your
that
parents
was
let me.
Right, that was an opportunity for us to get a little more involved as well. But I do think it was, I know that gave you a leg up within this community.
Oh, yeah.
Because there was others that weren't doing that and struggled to build their programs. But it did seem like that was, looking back, it seems like that was the key. I don't know if it had to be media, but for you, it worked. You know,
no, it didn't have to be.
It could have been anything.
Right, and it's one of those niche areas.
Yep.
I don't know if it's niche or niche. I keep hearing it both ways. It's one of those areas that my background was music. But it seemed like that wasn't working for me to help.
End. Right.
Right. But media thing is what affected everybody. You put some people's pictures up there. People like to see themselves in action, like to see themselves and their friends.
Yep. And those end of the year programs were, that was that outreach. That turned into an outreach because you were in front of, the students, and they by the end of the year, everybody knew you. So each year, new class. And that was the opportunity.
Yes, and that was my volunteerism. Church did not require that.
Right, yeah.
In fact, sometimes they didn't want that.
Yeah.
because I was having to work a lot of extra hours. But you know what? To reach a lot of people, if you you have an audience of 1,000, 1,500 people, at times 2,000, one shot for 15 minutes, that's pretty good shot.
Yeah, right.
A lot of work.
When else are you going to get that?
Right.
Opportunity. So,
Tell me about those years, some of the things that you were thinking when we did those first retreats, the festival down in Orlando. You and I think Matt and I, before we even doing media, we spent the night in tents down there with thousands of others, and heard concerts and all that stuff and speakers. Those first things in that middle school and high school, tell me the impact that had on you.
That was a long time ago. And
yes.
So that's tough to draw back on time, but I do remember that one. It was like Jesus 86 conference, I think, or something like that. But those are the memories that form anybody, and make us what we are today. I have to think, looking back, of our group, of our leadership team of students, and not just when I was there, but I'm sure it continued all the way through my brother's class and through others. Look at the people that got into the industry, and so that media, although that was your outlet or your way to get into the schools, it turned into careers for many, whether it was advertising or film and video or audio, and I think that there has to be a correlation there as well. And so, away from the church and away from, that outreach, that's people's livelihood that they stepped into because of that. And so I don't know what the statistics, I just know off of the people, that we could name now that have ended up in those careers. That's pretty neat to see that change, that changed so many lives through that directly, on that part. But as far as for me, I didn't know anything else. I mean, that's what, growing up in the church, that's just what we did. Every mission trip, every opportunity, obviously every Sunday and every Wednesday, I was going to be there because my parents, made that a priority for us and our family.
Yes. And
so I don't know if I had much of a choice in the matter, but I do know while I was there, you made it enjoyable. And those were the type of things, because we did different stuff. It wasn't just sitting in, a dark room. We went out and we did stuff. And for me, for my personality, that probably was the key, to keep me engaged in doing that. And I think the first mission trip, it was a high school trip, but I was still in 8th grade. So I don't know how I got.
You're a rising freshman.
Maybe
That's
I
how
was
you
going
did
in,
it.
but I was too young to go to Dominican Republic on my own with a group of kids. I'd never do that for mine. But my parents must have thought it was all right, and so I went, and that was quite an experience, to do that. And I think that led into, because it was a great experience, and although I was young, that led into the Guatemala mission trips for me, and being on the media side, and that went. Oh goodness, I don't know how many. I've never counted. I don't know how many times I went to Guatemala.
No, but I remember
Charlie.
I remember the one. Yeah, you went with Charlie Stewart, and Charlie. Thanks a lot. Charlie's gone now. He passed away about a year ago, I guess. But he was such a catalyst. A guy who spoke very little.
Yes, but did a lot.
But did a lot to do amazing things.
He got me once he realized I had the equipment that I'd sold my truck and everything else I had for. He gravitated real quick to that.
That's right. He started being one of your influencers and investors.
He was never invested with me, but he was a mentor. He invested knowledge, and that was something besides my dad, somebody I could go to, and he was a crucial part in forming how I run businesses today and what I do. Charlie was a big part of that, and I think, but he also saw an opportunity. He's a smart guy, and he said, "Here's this kid who has no attachment to anything. I can pull him and send him to Guatemala as often as I want.
Yeah.
He's going to take his camera and he's going to bring that story back." And so he knew what he was doing on that side of things, to get me involved, and I loved it. I never those trips I couldn't afford to do it, and so he made sure that it was taken care of and invested in that side of me as a person, but also made sure that we came back with the right stuff, as far as the media side of it. And so he was a huge part of those early years for me and kind of forming what I know of business right now. And so that was a big part of that.
I wrote down to make sure my brain would remember best missions video ever. I think that you made. We were in the garbage dump. It was not a safe place. Over 6,000 people lived in that dump.
What was that song that I used? I Want to Know What Love Is?
Yeah.
Maybe. It was a secular song.
I forget who did that.
Man, I got to find that one.
Yeah.
I got to find it. So
I know I have the video somewhere. Do you have a copy of that video somewhere?
I have no idea.
We got to digitize it,
Yeah, I have no idea.
But for you guys, best video ever, one of the scenes, we're there and we're talking people, babies were born. We're talking, I think the garbage dump area was probably the size of what city of Eustis was
easily.
At one time, at least. One of the scenes was you zoomed in from probably a football field away into this one lady that you couldn't see because all you saw was buzzards and you saw bulldozers and the smells were horrendous.
Yep.
And she was breastfeeding her baby in the middle of the garbage dump.
Yeah. Yep.
And that was a gripper. I mean, it gripped people.
But that's the stuff you come back with.
That's right.
And that's where, obviously Charlie was influential in that program being a success. But to come back and show people what was going on there, was my role, I guess, in that, to come back and tell the story. So, but that was, again, that was at the time, I didn't have anything better to do. So that was the right time for me. And he knew that. He knew that that was the part to,
you'd have been too busy had it been later. With a lot of the things that you're doing, a lot of projects.
Right. Yeah. I can't imagine later on. And it did start to thin out to where it was harder and harder to get out there. But I should go back and count. I imagine I was there close to, might have been 8 to 10 times that I over the, that period that I went. So that was good stuff though.
Here's what people relate with. And I learned this from JLD with the podcast we were talking about, the EO Fire, 7 days a week. People they relate best with our worst moments.
Yeah.
They need our best moments. We're going to talk about that. But what was probably your worst student moment, if you can think about it, if you know what that was, or your worst volunteer ministry moment?
Oh, I think because we were talking about the Guatemala trip, this is something I will never forget. And it's a lesson. It was more of a technical lesson that I learned a really hard way. You talk about that shot with the girl, or the woman breastfeeding in the dump. That was an opportunity that presented itself, and we captured it. I had better footage than that. It was a different trip. It was man, I knew when I captured it. I don't think it was at the dump. It was a different location. But I think I committed, a huge mistake. I was so excited to watch this footage that I went back afterwards. We were back in
Comey,
yeah, in the rooms there, and I grabbed my camera. And back then it was all tape. I don't know if anybody could relate
tape.
now. But so I went back and you could view the footage through the camera.
Yes.
And so I went back, rewinded a little bit. And I was watching this footage, and it was awesome. I mean, it was good stuff. And while I was doing it, my battery went dead, and so went and charged my batteries, probably got distracted. Next day, grabbed my camera and start shooting, and I taped over some amazing stuff.
And by the way, if you've ever done media, if you haven't done that once, you haven't done it.
Right. It happens, but it was a lifelong lesson.
It's always the best stuff, too.
It was the best stuff. And I hated it. That's probably one of my, I'm sure there was lots of worse memories, there, but that one stuck with me even today.
Yeah.
I imagine the other stuff that was bad, I probably erased from my mind, which is probably good too. I think we did a lot of good out there. We probably did a lot of bad as well. So
I don't know about that, but I know that there was a lot of good. But anytime you do something good, you're going to have bad situations.
Right, something will come. Anytime you got that many kids together, you're going to have bad situations.
That's right.
So any youth pastor
you had
would know
rocks
that.
thrown at you one time.
Yeah, yep. Well, it was the trip before us. They had guns pulled on them.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know
why
my
there's
parents
no students on that one.
Right.
There were no students on that one.
But why my parents would let us go again, after that.
Yeah.
I know there were some precautions taken after that.
There were.
But that was, those are stories you'd probably, if you lived to tell, it would be something to tell your kids about. But, yep.
Well, and I'll tell you what, I only did 5 trips personally, or 6 trips. One was a go and see before I took you guys. Mm-hmm. I did 5 trips after that. But I was reluctant to do them. I like going with organizations, and this is for youth pastors and guys that are doing it, because a lot of times we'll go, and I've seen a lot of people do it, and they'll go, oh, we're going to go on our own. Well, there's a couple of things when you go on your own, or if it's not designed for adolescents, and that is there's probably not a backup plan.
Yeah.
There's not. What's your backup way out?
Right.
And so I like going with organizations. I loved going on those Guatemala trips. And by the way, you went to the garbage dump because I said, if I'm going to take my high schoolers, we're going to go there.
We got to go there, yeah.
And that was a side trip. 40,000 Mayan Indians up in the Comitancillo area, which was the mission, and earthquake buildings we built there over a period, I think, of 10, 12 years, something like that. I mean, amazing stuff. Yep. From the rocks, this sounds like something made up. From the rocks out of the river, the Mayan Indians would go and pull them up, and this is in the mountains, 7,800 feet up, and pull them out of the river.
Right.
And we had washed them off, and this 2-story earthquake, structure. But the bottom line is the missions thing. I told people the garbage dump missions, we would spend anywhere from 2 hours. One time we spent 2 days building something in there. We usually didn't build anything. We'd go work with the school that was trying to get the people out of poverty. But 2 hours there was worth 10 days anywhere else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Best moments ever.
Ever?
That you remember. Best ones that came to your mind. And I will jar your memory a little bit.
Yeah.
We did the best video after you got your camera that we did for a national video for a thing called Challenge 90.
Oh, right.
And you and
Yep.
somebody pulled the boat and knocked you and who's the girl again? It was Moorhead. What was her first name?
Carrie.
Yeah. And you guys, it was not intentional. Once again, best moments become non-intentional.
That's right. And we were rolling.
So yes, you were rolling, and somebody pulled the boat, and you both just flew out the boat and went in the water.
Yep.
And so, but no equipment. That was the good thing.
Yes.
Tell us, best ministry moments for you as a volunteer, whether it was as a student or later. And you were a volunteer even as a high schooler and a college student and an adult.
I mean, for me, the best moments probably were on those trips, because it was different. That's when you get pulled out of your normal situation. That was a long time ago, though. I'd have to do a little more thinking on that one. But I'm sure those are the memorable moments. I'm sure we had some great times, here as well, and doing some of those projects. And, it probably was, around the media, those were the good experiences. That was the stuff that maybe that's because it was so much of what we did.
Yeah.
When we were, I
was
remember,
so hard. It was hard to do it then. It was not,
right.
I mean, it's hard now, but.
But it's very different now. I mean, I remember staying at the school here at Eustis High School overnight. To prepare for one. And I mean, that had never been done before, to allow students.
Our trust level had grown because they would have never done that.
I don't know if you could do that now.
No, probably not. Probably not. I don't know if I'd want to either.
Right. But that was exciting. It was, it was neat for us to do that. And I think that would have probably been around 90s as well.
Yeah, we had a 7:30 a.m. show.
Yeah.
And we had multiple shows we'd do that day, multiple screens.
Yep. The Berlin Wall had fallen down, right? We're going way back. If we did a piece on that. I remember that being part of it, or maybe it was like a 90s wrap up or something like
May
that.
Have
we
been.
did. Yeah, so those were fun times that we did. But it probably revolved around the trips. I mean, those were our best. Even the domestic trips. Going to North Carolina or Georgia, and obviously the ski trips were fun. Doing that kind of stuff as a kid. That's what gets your attention. Just getting away from home.
Yeah.
Is that was the fun stuff.
Yeah,
but,
we'd say we got more accomplished in a weekend on a trip than we could in 6 months.
Right, of having them
anywhere
at
else.
home. Right.
Yeah.
So looking back, that probably is I imagine from a youth pastor standpoint, you probably remember some of the great talks you gave and some of the and you're thinking, man, I nailed it. I just got through to these kids. But it might be something totally irrelevant that the kids pull from that. And now as a grown up, I think, looking back, again, the best times I had were probably on those when we got out of town, when we did something out of town. You were good about finding things to do here locally too. Besides, I know we did outreach and we did other, and that's probably the same for any city. You can find sad stories. You can find outreach in your city.
Oh yeah, it just doesn't matter where you are.
You did a good job of finding those as well. So we didn't have to leave, but probably made a bigger impact when we did. Looking back, that probably was it. But I don't know if I could pinpoint one particular thing and say, yeah, this was the best moment. Maybe when I'd probably have to say when, I don't know if it was a youth trip, but I didn't meet my wife in high school. So I'd have to say that would be the best moment. So I'd get in trouble if I didn't.
That's right. And I interrupted many of your dates because
You did. You probably taking
your
pictures.
Equipment was right. So hopefully she'll forgive me for all that.
Yes.
But and Bailey, your oldest, and he's the only guy. You have three girls,
yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then and Mackenzie I met here. Of course, we've met many times.
Mm-hmm.
But we've talked here and stuff. Couldn't get any dirt on you. I told you that. Tried to get her to give me something, but nothing.
She's not gonna. No.
You guys have done a lot with them. They have been world travelers since they were young.
Right.
Both grandparents have taken them many different places.
Right. And that was important to, that's my wife, obviously, that's very important to her. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of us, early on, we may be along for the ride, but then we all realized, this is fun. This is what we want to do. And so those trips became, a big part of, growing up for our kids is to do that. And again, I go back to the experiences I had through the traveling that I did was through the church. Those were, our family did a little bit of traveling, but, not quite as to the exotic places that we would go to through on the youth trips. And so I know the effect those can have on kids especially. And so that's a big part of our family growing up. Right now, with the oldest being 20 and the youngest being 12, we've done, when they were younger, we forced ourselves to do those trips, and go out of town and go on some of the some pretty neat experiences. And now as our kids are getting older, they are giving us feedback on that was they enjoyed those experiences. Maybe at the time, you want to leave them there, but at the looking back,
there's times they want to leave you there.
That's I'm sure. But looking back, it really was a neat experience. So that's become a big part of our family as well as the travels.
Well, what would you say to youth workers, youth pastors, and volunteers, either one, both, to as far as some things that you would have them do differently?
I don't think I could give. It wouldn't be fair to give specific advice or situations, but I think staying with the times is important. You nailed it back in the I guess it was 90s, right, when I was going through school. I mean, there was a good 10-year period there where, nobody could touch the program that you had put together. And that affected lives. It affected our church as a group. But I think that changes, throughout. Now, if you went in and told a school, hey, I want to come in and do slideshows for you, they probably laugh at you. I mean, it's going to be something different.
Right. It's not the thing.
Well, and they all have media programs, and they don't have the need that they did before. In the same way, if you told a group, hey, I want to take, your kids all to a foreign country, that's going to be a little harder now than it was when you did it before. But I think staying current is probably the biggest advice that I could give. And unfortunately, I don't know what that looks like because it's constantly changing. But maybe that's the benefit. The point is that the programs don't get stuck in your ways. The programs should evolve. They should change. Like anything else, if you're standing still, then you're probably dying. So you've got to stay up on the times. Being a good volunteer, being a good youth pastor is going to be knowing what that is and knowing what's coming, more importantly.
Let's talk about longevity of youth pastors. And by the way, some of the biggest churches in the nation, they don't really have a youth program. They have small groups because they're finding that they've changed with the times too, and
that it's different.
It's different. And families, a lot of them are just doing their things together, and then they'll have small groups. Let's talk about business, because the one thing I encourage youth pastors to do is to not be dependent on the salary that's coming through their church, because churches get rid of people all the time.
Right.
There is no such thing as a stable youth pastor job. I was there for 29 years, but there were multiple times people tried to find a way to get me out.
Right. But having a backup
plan. I was willing to go.
Right. But having a backup, not even a backup plan, but a secondary income would be great. I think the tough part, though, is you were so committed. I mean, you talk about longevity. I mean, nobody did it better than you. I mean, I don't know of any other, and I don't know if that was ever your goal, but it's just kind of how it worked out, but you, over that period, you did such a great job that first of all, that was your job security, that you had always done a good job there. But I think and the students, the parents, that kind of feedback is what they were going off of. But, having a secondary income or having, I think that's good for anybody, no matter what they're, whether it's a youth pastor or anybody else. But the challenge is, what do you do, what that doesn't take time away? I mean, you remember some of the busy times looking back, and I mean, and leaving for a week on a youth trip. Oh yeah, several times a year, right?
So 24 hours a day when you're gone.
So there's very few things that you could do, as a secondary income. And real estate probably is a popular one. I mean, that's where I don't do media anymore. I've gotten more into real estate the past 10 years. And so maybe that's where, it would be a logical place to look. Real estate is not passive. Anybody that says it is probably isn't doing it right. I work really hard on real estate. And so the idea of, I'll get a house and I'll rent it and then I'll sit back and somebody will mail me a check every month. It's the right idea. It just usually doesn't pan out like that. But it's still, maybe that's an opportunity. But I would find where their passion is. If they're open-minded, they're going to find opportunities for that. But and I hope that the church and the church body would encourage that as well. To know that that's a healthy thing to do. And I don't know if again, that's something that's frowned upon. But I think in the situation you were in, I don't think anybody would have second guessed at all if you had another revenue stream. And maybe a secondary career, on top of the youth pastor gig. Right,
and we were talking about one of the largest churches in the United States actually suggested that to their pastors, and most of them had a writing ministry or a speaking ministry or something like that. But there are all kinds of passive income things that you can do, but you got to research them, and you got to find the thing that works for you. Yeah. One reason we're doing the podcast, one thing that I was taught in my short-lived time in podcasting, but one thing that they said was, don't try to do something that's going to make you money. Find out where your niche is, what you do well, and what you love. Right. And just do that, because anything else is going to cause you more of a headache. And this takes stamina as well. Right. I mean, we're putting one out a week. Yep. And we'd like to do more. As we raise more money, we will try to go 2 to 3. 3 is all I would want to do a week. If you're doing with youth pastors, that's about all the days they got anyway.
Right. But and then
they
I
might
think
have
that's
30
the key,
minutes. Yeah.
is that it has to fit in with, I mean, your passion, your priority is still going to be, the church and serving that group of students. But I think there are other opportunities with technology, what it is today. There are other opportunities. Real estate for me was the right thing to do. And that's all I ever knew too, because I grew up in it. My dad and his brothers and my grandfather, it seemed like everybody always had something they were renting. And so that just seemed I never had a plan. It just seemed like the logical thing. And then eventually I found myself in it more. That's probably the process that I would suggest for any youth pastor looking for secondary income, is to, kind of see where they're led into that, and then take the opportunities when they're given. But don't let it pull from what your priority is. And that's being a youth pastor. It has to be something that is secondary. As long as their priorities are set, then they would do fine. But I do think it'd be a great idea to consider, for that, if they're in a situation that they could do that.
Right. There's a missionary friend that you and I know. His name's Juan, and he has another missionary who they sell little plastic electrical boxes online, and it pays for his missionary life, and he actually contributes to other missionaries.
Really? Just through that?
That. It comes through China. They've just set it up. It's just a website.
Right.
And no, that doesn't happen for everybody. And some people it's going to be real estate. Some people here, because we're around Disney, they actually do some stuff for Disney.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. But the opportunities are there if they're looking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure.
No, but that's very helpful. Oh, what was the guy, the podcast you're talking about with the real estate guy? Who is that?
The one I listen to is called Bigger Pockets.
Yes.
And it's a phenomenal source of information. They've got a website, and then their podcast, I think they're up to in the 270s right now, of how many, and it's just, talk about a quick education in real estate. I've done this since I was 19 when I bought my first rental property. And so I've just always done it, but again, things change. Obviously, we've gone through some interesting times with real estate.
You went through 2008 as well.
The past 10 years have been, past 15 years have been fun. There's a lot of up and downs, a lot of opportunities, and we'll continue like that. It'll be cycles, but educating yourself, getting immersed in that is probably an important place to start. But Bigger Pockets has been a great tool for me.
Yeah, it's something I'm looking forward to listening to myself.
Yep.
Well, DJ, I appreciate your time and all the things that you've done. People will never know that we couldn't even list all the things you've done for other people, all the things that you've done for me personally and my ministry since you became an adult, as well as all those other years that you still have to forgive me for. That pushed you guys way too hard. One thing I do remember, though, is that one of the other guys later was complaining to you, I think, and Matt one time about, oh, yeah, Doug, he's pushing us so hard. And you asked him what he was doing for me, and he told you guys, and y'all started laughing and going, that's nothing. What are you talking about? Right. You have no idea.
Luckily, I don't remember the bad stuff, so I have no idea.
For us, it's just stuff.
Yeah, right. I honestly, I have great memories of that, and so I'm not sure I would agree with you on that you were too tough. I imagine if you were tough, it's because we needed it.
Well, you know what? In your families, we're very strong families, and you are leadership type guys. I tell people about my kids, and I say this as a sense of thankfulness, not. And I told people there's a storm a minute in my house when our kids are all grown now, but when we're growing up, there's a storm a minute because, and I realized after doing some studies, all of my children were leadership children. Yeah. All of you guys, the Verkaik family, and yours were leadership guys. Your parents were leadership people. They just had to lead because that's who they were. Yeah. So who they still are. You guys are used to tough times because y'all would do tough things.
Yeah, it worked out that way.
Yeah, exactly. Well, DJ, thank you. And Youth Worker Nation, say goodbye, Youth Worker Nation.
Goodbye, Youth Worker Nation.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.